for that, Derek. And I now want to turn our attention to the point at hand, why we're talking again, which is in the evolution of your story, your involvement in the graph community. Again, recapping here, got interested in curation, fell into subgraph development, did some really great things there. And now you've used that branding that you used early on, you've transformed that into an indexer, and you recently launched Data Nexus as an indexer at the graph. So an incredible evolution of somebody that's learned about the graph and moved all the way up to becoming an indexer. Let's talk about that for a minute here. What went into your thinking there? Why did you decide, hey, I now want to become an indexer? And what were some of the ways you framed that decision and explored the possibility?
As I was going through subgraph development, I was really enjoying it. And the product of publishing the Rocket Pool subgraph, I was like, okay, this is something that I enjoy doing, a lot more than I enjoy calculating what a specific person's electricity load is like, or, that industry is just, it's not something that I have the same passion for. And so I was like, this would be a fun career. But at that point, I didn't yet know if it was something that could be a career. And shortly after, when I started to have other people ask me to build things, I started to run into the problem where I couldn't accept the work there because I had too many people reaching out. And my wife and I were preparing for our new daughter, who's now 7 months old. And, and that whole time period was kind of a rocket ride. But at that point, I started to see like, okay, there's definitely a demand here that is career worthy. And I'm coming from being in a very stable position, a huge company, very stable salary, very comfy living, and potentially giving up all of that to go into this wild ride of Web3 and blockchain and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people who are data oriented tend to be conservative in nature, and that they like knowing outcomes, and they think in very logical and analytical processes. And so it was an interesting shift of like, okay, well, how do I make this transition and make it something that's very, very stable? Because that was the obvious concern of how do I make this leap but do it in a stable way. And so there's an obvious need of people building subgraphs. That's something that is compensated, and I've proven that to myself. So that's undeniable truth. And then looking at how do I add stability, that's when I started to really start to flirt with the idea of running an indexer. Because project-based work has its peaks and its valleys of income. Sometimes you do a lot and you make a lot of money, and then sometimes you haven't delivered a product and you're not making that money. So I wanted to mitigate the peaks and valleys. And so I started to download the necessary applications. That way I could start indexing on the testnet. And that's where that's where Vincent and I really started to work together, because he was helping me through some of the aspects of DevOps that I'm not familiar with. And so we were building together and getting that running. And I just wanted to have the certainty that we could do this. This is something that we could comfortably do. So we started to go into the indexer stack, and from a revenue model, if I were to think about how I want the company to be compensated and stuff like that, having the stable income from an indexer and then kind of the peaks and valleys of subgraph development, those two kind of mesh into a great synergy. But the thing that I really liked about that model is that with subgraph development, you're enabling potential demand, or you're enabling query demand. And on the indexer side, you're serving query demand. And the analogy that I gave to my wife is I said it'd be like if you were a construction worker and you also were a property manager. So I'm building houses, and then I'm also serving the need of getting them rented out or building apartment complexes. And so there's the initial compensation of building, and then there's the longstanding compensation of serving queries. And so that as a model, it made a lot of sense to me because the two benefit each other greatly.